Hello and welcome to this video. In this video, I am going to show you 6 examples starting from very simple Nginx configuration to the complex WordPress configuration. Then you'll deploy a WordPress based website using Docker Compose. So let's get started. Alright, so let us first create the alias for Docker Compose. So in your home folder, if you do ls-la, you will find you have a bash rc file. If you open the bash rc file, you will see that you can specify some aliases here, and I have specified the alias Docker Compose in DC here. But the better way to do is to create a new file, bash aliases, and then write to it. So I'll just create a file bash aliases and just copy this one. It is alias DC is equal to Docker Compose. After this, I will just reload bash, and when I do DC, it will run Docker Compose. Alternatively, if you're using the C shell, then you can just do in the home drive. So in ZSH, in the home drive, you can create ZSH RC and go to alias, and here are the alias configuration, and I can mention here as alias DC is equal to Docker Compose, and I will just write. So once I reload it, I would be able to use it. So before starting with the Docker Compose examples, I want to show you the compatibility metrics. So here in this page, we have the Compose file format and the corresponding Docker engine release. So we are going to use 3.0, which is compatible with most of the features in the Docker Compose release of 1.13.0, and the further you can see here version 3 is designed to be cross-compatible between Compose and Docker Engine Swarm mode. So specifically, version 3 will have the functionality which also enables the Docker Engine Swarm mode. However, we are not going to use anything related to Swarm, but only the Docker Compose. So let's get started with the examples. So the first example that we are going to take is of Nginx. So first of all, let us define the Docker Compose version, and as I mentioned, we can use either 3.0 or 3, both are same. And now we will define the services. So what are the services that we are going to create? So first of all, the service that I'm going to create is Nginx web server. This is the service name, and I'm going to use that image Nginx latest, and I will expose it to the following list of ports. So 8080, which would be mapped to the container port 80, and then the other port would be 8443, which would be mapped to the container port 443. These two ports I will be exposing in this web server. I can also specify a container name, which can be Nginx container. So this is a very basic configuration of Docker Compose, and let's try to spin up the container. So I will create a folder example 01, and inside I will just create a file docker compose.yml and paste it, and just type dc. So the file is here inside this folder, and I will just type dc up. So as soon as I type dc up, it will pull the Nginx web server image and spin up the container, and as you can see, the container is spin up, and then it is attaching the terminal, my terminal, to the logs of this container or the services that have been spin up. The container name is Nginx container as per our specification. This is the container name, and then these are the complete logs. So if I visit the port number 8080, I can see I am able to log into Nginx. So you can check now with docker ps-a that the container is created about a minute ago, and it is executing attached to port 8080 and then 8443, and the container name is Nginx container, and this is the container ID. One thing to note is that whenever you spin up a container with Docker Compose, it will create a new network. our network that has been created, I can check into the example one default. So this is the network which has been created, and I can check inside Docker inspect the container name and you can see in the networks there is example one default, and this is the IP address, gateway and IP address. So every time you configure some containers using Docker Compose, there would be a different network. So this was a very basic configuration using Docker Compose for Nginx web server. Now let us make it more interesting, and we'll try to map a directory in Nginx where we can perform any changes, and same can be visible on the whole website. So let's go to our example, and what I will do, I will just map a volume. So let me create a directory inside our example 2, and inside example 2 I will create a directory web, and I will create an index.html file here. So this file is served from container host. This is the content of the file, and what I will do, I will just map this volume and I will change the container name to Nginx container volume and map it to the container path, that is word, that is user share Nginx HTML. So now let's see. I will go into the example 2 folder and I will create docker compose.yaml. I will create this file. So let me explain you what I have done. I have mapped this directory into my container host to the directory of the container inside the container. So in Nginx, the website homepage, the index.html file that we see here is located in this path, user share nginx/html, and I've just updated, or we can say map this volume to this directory. So whatever content is stored in this directory, in web directory, would be displayed on the website. So let's go to the website and I will just see up, and now you can see it didn't require to download the Nginx image, it was already there. It only created the Nginx container wall which I have specified in this Docker Compose file, and it has exposed it to 8080 and 8443. Now if I refresh it here, you can see this file is served from the container host. So this is the file that is being served from here. So if I go to example 2 and inside web and I update this file, this is version 01, and you can see here it would be automatically reflected. So this is version 01. So I will add one more thing, just adding a p tag. This is a p tag, and it would be updated here. So in this way you can map it to a specific folder, and this is very useful. The use case is, suppose you are a web developer or you are a person who is updating some configuration. You can map a volume and you can see the required changes reflected on the Docker container. So this was the second example where we have mapped the volume inside any required Docker container. Now let us make it more interesting. What we will do, rather than downloading the Nginx image, we will create our own, or we will build our own Nginx image using Dockerfile. So I'll go into the directory and I will create one more folder, example 3, and inside example 3 I will create a new folder, Nginx. In example 3 I will create a new file, Dockerfile, inside Nginx, and I will create a new file, docker compose.yaml. Alright, so if I show you the hierarchy, folder hierarchy, so what's happening here, we have a directory example service X, and inside service 6 we have a Dockerfile, and here we have our Docker compose file. So first of all, let us create this Dockerfile. So we'll use the Nginx latest image, and let me just create inside this file. So in the Docker, I will just type command copy. Now index.html is the file name, and we have to provide the destination, that is user share Nginx HTML. Alright, and what I will do, I will just define the CMD, and for Nginx it should be specified in the same Nginx image. So let's go to the Docker Hub Nginx, and inside Docker Hub Nginx, let us see what is the command that has been exposed. So if you go to this tag, in the end you will have this command Nginx daemon off. I will copy it. So this is our Dockerfile, a very simple Dockerfile which you can use to build any image. Now I can also do some extra operation to customize my image. That is up to you. What will happen, this during the time of build, the index.html file will be copied into the user share Nginx HTML directory, and then Nginx would be started. Now let us go to Docker Compose. So first of all, we'll define the version, and version is 3, and services Nginx web server, and I will define the container name as Nginx custom cont1. Alright, now let us define what we have to do. We have to first build the image, and context would be build context, that would be inside the directory /nginx, so inside the directory Nginx, and then we have to specify Dockerfile. So I can also specify Dockerfile if it is in different name. I will expose it to the ports, and in the same way as I did before, I will expose it to 8082, map to 80, and no other ports. So this is the custom, you can say, Nginx configuration. Now I have to copy 3 things. So first of all, I will go to my server. So I'm inside my example 03, and as I mentioned, I will create a folder Nginx, and we'll create a new file, Nginx Dockerfile, and I will paste the content of this Dockerfile here, and inside Nginx I will create one more file, index.html. This file is copied during the image build. Alright, and here I will create the docker compose.yaml file, and let's spin up using DCF. We'll use a detached mode, and okay, so here it said the Nginx web server was built because it is already existed. Now we had already used the service name Nginx web server, so now we'll use an option build, but before that let us do docker dc down, and now let us see docker ps-a. Okay, no containers are there, so let us just do dc up -d-build, and it will again rebuild the image, and it has copied index.html in user share nginx.html. Now if we check our dc ps-a, if we check our dcps, you can see here we have the Nginx custom container 1 already spin up, and it is spinned up on 8082, and I can check on 8082, and you can see this is the file which is copied during the image build. Now, so this was the third example which we had used to build an Nginx image. So let us take it to the next level and see an example of multi-container run. Let us come to our example number 4 and new folder, example 4, and inside example 4 create a new file, dockercompose.yaml. Alright, so this is a multi-container, so we will have 2 containers and it will be only run, so Nginx and MySQL. So first of all, let us define the services. So first would be Nginx web. Now I'm specifying a different service, and we will use the same method. Image would be Nginx latest, and ports would be, container name would be Nginx multi-container service. Ports, I would expose it to only one port this time, 83, and now let me define another service, MySQL service, and I will use the image MySQL latest. I will define the container name in the same format as MySQL multi-container, and then I will just expose it to the port 3306. Now for MySQL we require the MySQL root password for this to spin up, so we'll go to environment and define the MySQL root password, which would be some secret value, and where you can identify what are the environment variables required. So you can go to the hub page of that image and you can see that starting a MySQL instance is simple and you require this MySQL root password. So we have provided the MySQL root password. So let's go back, and inside example 4 I will just create this dockercompose.yaml and paste it, and let us check DSPS. There is nothing here, so we'll do DS up. Okay, now you can see I haven't specified version here, so let me just specify, and it is giving me error. So what I will do, I will just do a docker compose vi, and in the top I will specify version 3, and if I just run it again, so it is working. Now it will pull the MySQL image because I don't have MySQL image in my system, and once it is done we would be able to see both the containers. Now see, it is creating both the containers, Nginx multi-container service and MySQL multi-container service, and it is saying done. So if I check DSPS, you can, let me just clear it and show you here. So if I check DSPS, you will see that you have all these services, both the service MySQL multi-container service and Nginx multi-container service up on these ports. So in this way you have your Docker Compose utilized to run multi-containers in a single configuration file. So let us start with the next example, example 5, and in this case we are going to create a new file, and first of all we will check what is the multi-stage builds. Now, so what I will do, I will take an Ubuntu 18.04 image and I will name it as builder, and what I will just do an apt-get -y update and apt-get -y install wget and unzip. So the idea is to download WordPress. We'll just copy this and I will run wget, and in the same line just mention double and unzip latest.zip, which I have downloaded from the WordPress website and extract in the WordPress directory in the root directory of this container. Alright, so this is the only task of the builder image, where it will install, duplicate and unzip and download a WordPress latest image or latest zip directory from wordpress.org website and unzip in this image. Now I will take a Nginx image and copy from builder WordPress directory into user share Nginx HTML, this directory. And as I've shown you in the previous file, that we need to expose the command, so we'll do it again, and that's it. So this is our multi-stage build image. Now I will specify a docker compose.yaml file, and inside docker compose YAML file, first I will specify version, that is 3, and I will specify service Nginx WP server, and I will build the image with context, that is the same directory, and Dockerfile is and then I will expose the ports 80 to 80. So this is our docker compose file. So let me get this docker compose.yaml, okay, and the docker file inside the same directory. So the use case of this is that you can use the builder image to perform a step which can be used to build and then to execute. This is very helpful if you are using Angular or Node.js, where you need to build, or a C++ program where you need to first build and then execute, So I have both the file docker compose and Dockerfile. Let me check the status of the docker compose and let me check the various containers. So I will just remove this docker -eq, and using this command I will just do a docker stop and then docker rm. Alright, that's done. Now we don't have any container running, and we'll just do a -d, and you'll see it will first download the data that I requested. It will download WordPress latest.zip, so it is downloading latest.zip, and then it will extract. So it is extracting now, and then it will copy it to the Nginx service. So if you do dcps, we'll see my Nginx web service is there. If you do a docker execute, you can with container image and login using bin bash cd user share Nginx HTML. So I have the WordPress file here, and inside the WordPress you have the complete PHP file. Now the last example is to spin up a WordPress website using, I will just write the docker compose file and utilize the already existing WordPress images as well as MySQL images to run the WordPress. So let us write the docker compose and version is 3. Alright, so first of all we require the database. So database, first of all we define services database, and inside database we have image MySQL latest, and we will map a volume. So let me create a directory here. Alright, I will create a directory in example MySQL, and the other one would be WP for WordPress. So go inside example, copy this. I will map this volume to the directory where MySQL data is being stored, that is var lib MySQL, so that my data is persistent. Alright, now we'll specify the environment. Okay, that is MySQL root password, and I will just type WordPress MySQL database, which is WordPress. This is a very basic configuration. Don't use these type of username and password in your configuration because this will mess up your website. So I will just name everything as WordPress here. Now this is about my DB service. Now let us define another service, WP, and inside WP I will use image WordPress latest. Okay, and I will map a volume example 6. This is data, and here created another as this is WordPress and this is MySQL, and this would be var www HTML that I'm going to map. Okay, I forgot one thing, that is I don't need to expose this port, but just specify it, port 3306 here, and I will use the same to expose the ports here, and I will spin it up on port 80. Now I will specify the environment, and I will use the WordPress DB host. You can just write DB, so it will reference the same host or the container host IP from here. Second is WordPress DB user, and which is WordPress. Third, WordPress DB password, which is also WordPress for the sake of simplicity. And fourth, WordPress DB name, which is also WordPress. Alright, so this is a very basic simple configuration for WordPress, and let's just define it inside our, I'll just create this file dockercompose.pyml, and I will paste it, and that's it. And I will just do dc-fd. I will pull the WordPress image as well. We have already pulled up the MySQL image, so no need for downloading that. After performing all the steps, it will create the database WordPress, and it will configure WordPress for you. Now let us check the status, tcps, and you can see your DB is also working, and example 6 WordPress is also working. So if I go to my website here, okay, as you see, I just need to refresh, clear the cache. So it is the WordPress installation, and I can just mention here WordPress on Docker. So username is WordPress, and no need to provide any IP. Just provide username and example.com and install WordPress, and that's it. Your WordPress is installed, and you can check it here, WordPress on Docker. So go ahead and try it out, and in case you have any queries, you can put in the comment box, and I would be happy to help you.